Hey, Mindy, you're not going to be able to turn on your camera. It looks like it's been disabled, possibly because of the webinar.
Well, it's my message says host, or Neto, there's another thing you got to click, apparently.
Yeah, I'm going.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the meeting. So let's see here. The Housing First Subcommittee of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has now commenced. It is November 30th at 4:05 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and to protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and attendees to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. There is not a dial-in option, I don't believe, but in case anyone has dialed in using the call-in number to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so that we can track quorum. Also, in order to comply with the state open meeting law, this will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. I'm going to just do roll call based on who I see. I see that Mike Edmonds is here and Mindy Bernstein is also here.
Yes.
If any members of the audience have not been promoted to a panelist and you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Ernesto, as quickly as he can, to promote you to a panelist so that you can speak. The next item on the agenda is the call to the audience. If any members of the public would like to address the Housing First Subcommittee, now is the time for you to do so. We have not specified the time, but I'm going to go ahead and give no more than 15 minutes, and I'm going to wait a couple seconds to see if anyone would like to speak. All right, if any members of the audience join late, if someone could just let me know, and we'll circle back to the call to the audience. I know that the next item on the agenda is Joanna presenting the tenant protections from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. I'm going to go ahead and move Brandi and Ernesto to ahead of Joanna, just because I know that Brandi may have to leave at end of business. All right, so
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of it. I missed when I lost you when you said I'm going to move Brandi to what?
I'm moving Brandi and Ernesto to right now, and then Joanna will present after that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Brandi, ready.
So Housing First update is let me see. I guess I can't share my video. Okay, so we, as of the 21st of November, from January through November 21st, we have in the 4 different city-owned shelters been able to serve 414 people. This is 152. Now I think it's about 157 as of today, people, current residents there. And out of all 4 of those sites, we've been able to house 225 people since January 1. We're continuing to work with partners like Old Pueblo, Community Bridges, Gospel Rescue Mission. We are also getting ready to undertake a mobile shower pilot. We'll be picking that up this week. Myself and some HCD, Eddie has been gracious enough to accompany me in a dually to go and pick up that 3-stall shower from Phoenix. And back down here, we'll test it. We'll see what it's going to take to have it up and running. And then we will go out and make sure that we can dump off black water at our pilot station that's near Triple T truck stop, because of course we need somewhere to dump the black water. We will buy supplies for the shower, towels, hygiene, soap dispensers, things of that nature, things that people need, women's sanitary supplies, things like that to have available. And we will begin probably mid-December doing a 2-day-a-week trial run at this. We are expecting to eventually get our own shower and our own dually. So we can probably move that up to 5 days per week at that point. But, you know, ordering a new car and a new shower trailer does take some time. So we're looking at starting this up in mid-December. I'll keep you posted as to where and when. Let's see, what else are we doing here? We're just doing normal vouchering people, getting them into housing, finding housing. We are also going to be implementing a HEART program, which is Housing Emergency Action Resource Team. And that will consist of a supervisor and 4 navigators that will be specifically working with people in their homes, their vouchers, so that they maintain their home and their voucher. I don't know if anyone here knows, we do, we do support housers all the way across the board. Even at the PHA, we don't have a sobriety requirement, but we're finding that people are attritioning them out of their voucher because they're not practicing harm reduction in their unit. So, using in your unit, leaving paraphernalia out when landlords come to take a look, that's going to be an immediate 24-hour crime-free addendum. It's in your most lease agreements if you don't sign a separate one, aside from that when you go into your lease agreement. So we try to prepare them for some of these harm reduction techniques at shelter. But some people slip through the cracks. So we feel like we want to try and see how case management specific to these voucher holders will be in home. And if it's successful, scaling that and what that looks like, right? Having people that have a manageable caseload so that they're assisting them every day life choices. Making sure that people aren't taking advantage of some of our people that are in housing by squatting in their units or taking the unit over entirely, being able to go into their unit and check it out and say, hey, you can't be here, you can visit, but you can't camp out here, that type of thing. So we do that now. We just don't have a formal process for that. And I think that's what bringing the HEART team is going to be about, is making that formal process in Housing First and having some case management services available for our peeps. What else? Showers, shelters, housing. I think that's it. I think that we've had a couple of visitors down here. We had ADOA come in and take a look at our properties. As you know, they're our funder on our LIHTC property. Am I correct there, Neto?
Brandi, ask me again.
ADOH being our funder for our LIHTC Milagro.
They were here this week.
Absolutely. And I believe that they are the funders for that project. So if nobody knows, it will eventually, where the no-tell sits in our Oracle shelter that's run by CBI, a vacant lot in between those 2 properties. And eventually we will break ground there on a new 48 unit low income tax credit property. I believe that'll be 48 units. And that's headed up by HCD and PCD. And they know the details of that, but great stuff. Permanent housing, right? That's what we need in this community. And low income permanent housing. So ADOH was here Monday, as I said. They were very impressed with the way that we're running our low barrier shelters and collaborating with many different agencies to bring this into those folks. So now our recognition is going even higher than just the Tucson area. So things are happening, folks. So we are happy about it, and Housing First, of course, and this group should be really happy about it because we're getting on the map with some of the work that we're doing. And that's all I have. Neto, do you have anything?
Other than technical difficulties? Thank you, Brandi. Liz, I'm having some difficulties with the screen share, the share screen tool. Just really quick, and we'll present more information at next week's full commission meeting, but tomorrow we're going to issue the press release on the opening of the pre-application process for the wait list. And we'll start in December a public campaign informing our various communities that the wait list, rather the pre-application wait list period, opens on January 3rd.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Neto. And thank
you.
you, Brandi. Does anyone have any questions for either Neto or Brandi?
Just a couple of quick ones, Liz. First of all, Neto, just so you don't get thrown off, I muted you because there was some background noise there while Brandi was talking. So that was me that caused that for you. Brandi, real quick, I know you said you're going to keep us updated, but are you going to be like notifying the wards of how you're doing with the shower thing?
Yes, ward offices will be notified. So really what's going to happen is we have Community Safety, Health and Wellness, Sarah Lanius, and our interagency resource manager, Mari Vasquez, who are in communication with ward offices and things of that nature. I'm operational, Mike. I am the person that will run through the trenches, try taking a shower out in public, do all the stuff that gets us to where we need to be. And it's up to other powers that be to warn whoever that we're coming. But yeah, I agree with that, Mike, that we'll be letting ward offices know, and we'll let that happen through Community Safety and Madi.
Okay, and it's a loaner, I guess, this first run that you're going to have to get? You're going to get a loaner and then we'll get ours or something? Absolutely.
So we're in contract with the Salvation Army on this loaner. And so, you know, we'll be really careful with it. And ours is already in process. So it should be about 3 months or so until we have ours.
Okay. And lastly, just a quick nomenclature question. Are we calling Wildcat 1 and Wildcat 2? Is that the work names we're using now, or do you want to use something else?
Well, we don't have signage that says Wildcat 2. We say Wildcat 2, as you know, Mike, just because we don't want to say, hey, come on over to the no-tell with us, right?
I know. Yeah.
So we want to be careful with that. So we do say, you know, Wildcat 2. And most of the in people like this group and some other folks that work with know that that's how we reference it, but we don't really have the signage. It's still no-tell. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Mindy, it looks like you have your hand up.
Are you familiar, Brandi, this is for you. Are you familiar with Tom and M that run a program on Sundays out of the Blue House? I think it's on Church. They have a Sunday.
I think Mindy's referring to Z Mansion.
Z Mansion, yes.
Mansion,
yes, yes. So we are very familiar with Z Mansion. That's one of the places we refer folks when we're not going to be piloting so Mindy, this is surely a pilot program. This is to fill in the gaps where those places are not doing it. We probably won't operate on a Saturday or Sunday just because we have people that do that on a Saturday and Sunday. We have Sister Jose's, we have the Z Mansion, as you mentioned. I think there's a couple of other ones, but I don't know them offhand. This is more to take the shower to the people. So literally mobile. We're looking at Casa Maria in one of those sites. We're talking to a couple of churches because, you know, of course, we're going to need water hookup. We're not sure. I'm not sure about the technical pieces of the trailer. We'll learn more about that on Friday when we pick it up. But this is surely a pilot and are open to suggestion, feedback, all of the above. So, I mean, if you guys from this group have any ideas in mind, please, by all means, let us know, because this is new. Anything new takes a village, right?
Yes. Liz, may I ask another question?
Go for it.
So I love it. I love having the shower and all the amenities. I'm thinking ahead about clothing, clean clothing, or a washer and dryer. That might be too far ahead, but you take a shower and put clean clothes on.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree, Mindy. So the thing is that the direction that I've been given, I have a team of people that oversight me, because if not, I'll be going to regulation jail. They really tell me what I can spend on or not. And from what it sounds like, it's pretty flexible. So, I mean, that's maybe something that we can look at, and there's other funding that's pretty flexible around outreach operations. And we'd have to get that squared away. So that is an absolutely good idea, Mindy. I know that one of the showers that we were looking at to purchase, and I'm not exactly sure of the details because someone else was doing that purchasing, was gonna have a washer and dryer unit on it, as well as the showers. So I don't know if our shower is going to be equipped with that when it comes. I don't think the Salvation Army one has that, but it will be a pleasant surprise if it does. We've gotten very minimal info other than basic, size and capacity and that type of thing. So we'll see more on Friday. So stay tuned. I think that's a good idea though. And we'll definitely try to find some funding for that.
I'm happy.
Mindy, just to be mindful of time, I'm going to go ahead and give you Brandi's email if you want to follow up with her. If Brandi's able to stay on after Joanna's presentation, then we'll definitely take the time for more questions with her.
It's not a question, it was an offer but they'll send me her email.
Okay, thank you. All right, Joanna. I understand that you don't have any slides for your presentation, but Joanna is here with the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And Joanna, you can take it away whenever you have audio.
Can you hear me now? Do you hear me?
You are very quiet.
1 second. Let me switch audio.
There we go. That's better.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm sorry. I can't turn on my camera either. I don't really like to do presentations with no camera, but that's okay. And yes, I don't have any slides because I just kind of wanted to give an overview of what the coalition has been doing around tenant protections and what we're learning from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. So yes, sorry, just to introduce myself for anyone I don't know, I'm the Research and Policy Director with the Arizona Housing Coalition. So we're a statewide member organization. I believe many of you on this call are members, and we provide education, we do collaboration and advocacy around homelessness and affordable housing. So tenant protections is something that we've been really interested in recently. And it's really great to hear that this work group is addressing this too and making a plan. And I hope I can be useful in providing some insight on some examples that may be replicated. Before I delve into some local level examples though, I do think maybe it could be helpful to just give a brief overview of what is happening at the state legislature in the next session, because it's always important to take that into consideration, because any tenant protection bill that's implemented at the state level can be applicable at the local level too, and there's opportunity for advocacy and support as these bills are likely to support, whatever you're working on. It has been come to my attention that there are 10 bills proposed for tenant protections and 4 for rent control at the session coming up starting in January. I'm not saying all of these will go anywhere. Often we have many bills that are presented that don't go anywhere, but it's certainly worth tracking and getting behind. So as I stated, Liz, if you want me to send any bill numbers, I'm happy to do that. Also, worth finding out who your legislators are for your district if you don't know, and contacting them directly about any of these bills. Just some examples, I've seen a statewide source of income discrimination protection in there, rent increase notice bills, the development of an eviction prevention study committee, which would be great to see. Some things around fee disclosures and more rent increase regulations. So I just wanted to mention that, definitely worth tracking. In terms of the local level, as mentioned, we've been working with the National Low Income Housing Coalition, who have been doing a really big effort in this past year, working with local leaders nationally around the implementation of tenant protection. And there's a tenant protection resource guide that lists some of these. I'll put the link into the chat in a moment, but I did want to just talk through some. One of these tenant protections that's really a hot topic is just cause eviction legislation. And that's a recommendation that's possible at the state, local, and federal level. I did notice too that there is actually a bill drafted for just cause eviction at the upcoming state legislative session that you may want to look at. That's Senate Bill 1588. The reason I say that is probably worth looking at the language. I was having a look at it yesterday just to see what this bill is proposing. And what it is proposing is that any tenant that's maintained a 12-month tenancy or more may only be evicted if there's a material breach, non-payment of rent, or if the landlord or family member lives in the property and they're removing the unit from the rental market. So that kind of wording addresses the issues of landlords refusing to renew a lease for other reasons. We saw, for example, landlords ending leases at the end of a term to work around eviction moratoriums during the pandemic, or if landlords wanted to get tenants out to leverage flipping and increasing of rent, or to retaliate against a complaint for repairs. So the idea of just cause eviction is to provide basically greater stability to renters around these issues. And there is a specific guide that I'll put a link to again, specifically for just cause evictions that would be worth having a look at. There's also, just before I move into more on the National Low Income Housing Coalition efforts, I do want to mention too that there's quite a few efforts moving forward regarding mobile home sites in Arizona. A collaborative effort formed a couple of months ago and led by the Tucson Alliance for Housing Justice. So I don't know if any of you are involved in that, but their work has been great. It includes a mapping of mobile home parks and bringing forward the really unique issues related to mobile home residents, like heat-related deaths, which there's been a huge increase, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, and loss of land and plots due to investment activity. So there is an effort being worked on right now to draft a bill that would allow for residency-owned ownership, and taking advantage of technical experts to provide finance and expertise for park owners to come together and purchase land. It's really hard to do in our current landscape and needs some legislation. So I'm happy to connect anyone to that effort. And there's also some research from ASU to explore tenant protections specifically related to heat-related deaths in mobile home parks. That's another effort and another angle that people might be interested in. In terms of, just going back to National Low Income Housing Coalition, the angle that they've taken is, how do we take what we learned from the era of implementing the emergency rental assistance program and apply tenant protection policy from those lessons. So things like focusing on access and equity, using data to identify at-risk neighborhoods, thinking where people go, schools, libraries, childcare centers, DES offices, how can we target resources in those places? I'm working with a group here in Maricopa County, but lots of potential to replicate around creating one-pagers and simplified language to renters who are at risk of eviction on the process and what the next steps are. There is also an effort to work on a draft rule change petition to change the language that's provided to renters who receive eviction complaints, because this language is really stuffy and inaccessible. And it needs to be, more friendly and easy to understand to inform renters what happens next. That process requires a really lengthy process through the Supreme Court, unfortunately, but we are working on that to put in a petition to change that language. There's also, I'm going to drop this again, I've got a few links to drop into the chat in a moment, around specifically what the National Low Income Housing Coalition is doing around lessons learned from the ERA. But I just wanted to pull out some specific best practices that we are learning from partners nationally. And I'll just go through those real quick. First thing is, if there's a resource like eviction prevention, utility assistance, how can we expedite that to neighborhoods that are historically under-resourced? So for example, pulling out specific zip codes, if an application comes in from a zip code that is under-resourced, then how can we expedite a application for rental assistance, for example. The other piece is diversion court. That's a huge conversation right now. I know Tucson has the EELS program, which in my opinion is one of the best examples we have in the state of Arizona for bringing resources to those at risk.
What does the acronym EELS stand for?
Let me find that out. I cannot think off the top of my head, but it's the...
I'll find out, Joanna.
Okay, thank you.
Is that emergency eviction legal services?
Yes. Thank you.
You're so good, Joe.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So yes, this is an example of eviction diversion court. I don't know what the plan is from the city, whether that's a permanent, because I believe that was funded by American Rescue Plan Act dollars, was it? Or some temporary dollars. But, one ask is, can there be more robust funding for that? As part of that, encouraging a data review. That's a huge thing that the programs are doing nationally right now is, okay, we had to get all this money out the door and act really quickly during the pandemic, but let's review what we did. Have we been reaching everybody who was at risk? Are there groups that were falling through the cracks? And are there ways that these programs can be targeted more effectively in a more equitable way? Capacity building, obviously capacity is always an issue in our field. Can there be funding for specified teams? That's an example of what other municipalities are doing, like designing specific tenant protection teams. And then a huge theme that's coming through is grassroots engagement too, relating to resources around eviction preventions. For example, landlord and tenant liaisons working on the ground in at-risk zip codes and complexes where there's a high amount of evictions to bring more resource information and eviction prevention. So doing more boots on the ground stuff. Atlanta has a right to counsel ordinance at the local level. That could be worth researching, and it would be really great to see that implemented at least for certain populations like low-income renters. And there is an organization named the National Coalition for Civil Rights to Counsel, and that's an organization that works across the country to provide technical assistance in the development of right to counsel models for local governments. There's also a lot of states and local municipalities that are doing things around land registry. So for example, in Washington, if a landlord is not registered with the county assessor, they cannot file for an eviction. I think it's pretty cool. Creations of a tenant and landlord call center. This has happened in Oregon, and that would equip people with knowledge and advice around their housing issue. I guess similar to 211, but more legalistic and in depth. And then streamlining paperwork for resources. So, for example, if there is a utility assistance or emergency rental assistance program at the city level, instead of asking for proof of income, just using like TANF for SNAP letters because that income's already been verified. So just, process discussions and process changes to make things more simplified. And then just the final example that I pulled out in Philadelphia, they built a really good relationship with the courts, which I believe Tucson and Pima have been doing that too, which led to the sharing of the docket to emergency rental administrators for targeting purposes, which is really great. And that might already be being done in the EELS program. Is the docket getting shared so that direct outreach can be made, but worth checking and seeing if that's a gap. So that was a lot of information. I just wanted to pull out, like I say, some examples from this report, and I'm going to drop the links to these resources in the chat. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning right to counsel, Joanna. I think that's, as we talk about, the EELS program being an emergency eviction legal service program, right to counsel really seems like a step that would move towards making that permanent as a right. And I really like right to counsel because it's not something radical really. It's just saying everybody should have the same legal representation when you get to court. So you're making sure that a landlord that goes to court isn't trying to skirt the law. And that's a really good program. You mentioned some of the organizations behind that too. There's a lot of really good research about the benefits of those programs, and not just social benefits towards people, but they actually end up, if you look at the studies from Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, a few other places, Baltimore, saving money with those right to counsel programs. So those are really good. I'd be interested as we get bill numbers for what's coming up in the state legislature. I'd be interested in having those so that those of us who have access to the request to speak system for the legislature could go in there and put some support behind those. In addition to contacting our reps, getting that in there so that all the legislature can see that those bills have some support. And the third thing I had on my mind was, I know Ward 3 had talked about some of the requests from constituents around things that they might like to see. And one of them was, I think might fall under tenant protections too, and it was limits for things like application fees that landlords are sometimes charging some exorbitant application fees or collecting lots of application fees, and that maybe there's an opportunity to have some limits there to protect rental tenants. And I'd be interested in knowing more about that, if we have any programs like that, and what's possible in Arizona, what we would need legislative change for, et cetera. But thank you. That was a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And just a couple of comments. Thank you for bringing up the research on right to counsel, because it's really great when you see that research, and it really shows the high success rate of right to counsel programs on preventing eviction, because there's quite a lot of argument, and I hear this a lot for Arizona, is what's the point in putting forward a right to counsel when people generally don't have much legal resource in eviction cases because of the way our law is written, and if rent is owed, there's not really much a judge can do. But I think that the point that's missing in that argument is that when we actually bring people to court and we provide that assistance, it's the connection to resources too that's really important, that actually leads to higher success rates in preventing eviction. In terms of the bill numbers, I'm going to see if I can grab those right now and put them in the chat, and then I'd also be happy to email them. And then limits for application fees, yes, agree. That's really important, and I'm pretty sure there were some examples coming through from other areas around the country. So I'm going to look into that a little bit more and see what else I can find out about that. Thank you.
That sounds great. I don't know that we've got a chat in here, but if you email those, I'm sure if they go through Netta or Liz or Mike, they can CC me on that. Thank you.
Correct, Joe. Please, Joanna, email them to me.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any questions for Joanna? Joanna, so we're working on a tenant protection plan. It's currently in development, and something that we have discussed as a subcommittee and that I've talked to some attorneys in the state about is where do these tenant protections overlap with prohibitions in the Arizona Landlord Tenant Act? And what we can do in order to address the need for tenants to be protected and in our city while still being constrained by state law.
Yeah, that's super important. And I think that's an unfortunate piece of the local level work is always having to be mindful of the prohibitions at the state law level and seeing what is possible. And always another angle is, I know you're focused on local level, and this is, always something like the role of the Arizona Housing Coalition, it's applicable to, is identifying, are there state law barriers that really need to be addressed to make room for, like in this case, increased tenant protections. And that's certainly something that I'd be happy to be kept in the loop about. And if there's anything that I can do to help with kind of identifying those prohibitions and barriers as you're doing this research and building the plan, I'd be more than happy to be involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much for offering that. We'll keep you in the loop as it develops. Do you have any specific recommendations that you would make for things to include in a tenant protection plan, regardless of whether it's preempted by state law?
I think really gleaning on what's already being done is really important. It is reviewing what existing infrastructure you have based on what was set up during the COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis response, like the EELS program, as I mentioned, because I think it can be really great to make the case for, hey, look how successful this was. We now need more robust funding, because here's the reality is that we're at a point now where the eviction prevention financial resources are drying up, and that's incredibly worrying based on what our eviction numbers are looking like. And so I think focusing on keeping those programs that exist and finding more funding resources is a real priority right now. And then in terms of kind of more medium term things, I do think having a look at just one second here. I'm sorry. Having a look at the work that's going on around mobile home sites, I think is really important, because there are so many mobile home sites around Arizona, and it's something that's often missed out of the question or of the conversation. And because, again, those efforts are existing and the research is there, then I think that that's really useful to have a look at. And then also the just cause eviction piece, I think is really important, and it's something, like I say, is like really gaining momentum elsewhere, and there's probably a lot of research on it. So yeah, that's what I would say. I would recommend, but also I would really recommend having a look through these reports too, and just seeing what other ideas you can pull.
Awesome, thank you, Joanna. I see Mindy's hand is up.
Thank you, Liz. Have you heard anything about tiny home villages or building tiny home shelter options for reducing homelessness?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's definitely something that I've looked into in the past, and I've heard of some efforts around the state. I actually visited a nonprofit just a couple of years ago in Prescott, who were doing some tiny home stuff, and it was really great to see. It was kind of linked to their shelter, and it was being used as transitional housing. I think that the implication there is always the zoning regulation and just seeing what is allowable under city ordinance. But I think that's definitely something that is a consideration as we look at addressing homelessness and affordable housing generally, looking at all options, and we know it is an affordable way to construct. It's just making it work with zoning and finding the land always appears to be the barrier.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I see your hands up.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention about yields is, if I remember right, that's all being handled at the county level. And those programs save money for cities, states, and counties. So as we talk about perhaps continuing or expanding that, it'd be great if the city would pitch into that. I feel like we're kind of freeloading off the county right now in that sense. It would be great to have kind of an effort, an agreement between those two, that the city and the county maybe both work together on that. And I don't know how that's handled in other jurisdictions. You mentioned Philadelphia. If I remember right, Philadelphia is a city and a county, and if it's going through the DA's office there, it's Larry Krasner running all of it, I imagine. So it's, I imagine that's a pretty favorable program.
Yeah, Philadelphia able to do some pretty innovative things, it seems. But yeah, in terms of like the relationships there, I've definitely seen a mixture of both. So whether it's the county or the city implementing their own thing, or a partnership, and oftentimes a partnership and collaborating and sharing resources is builds a more robust program that can be where funding can be increased. And I would say, like, for Pima County, because so many of the residents are in the city of Tucson, it would make sense. So certainly something to put forward to the city, I would say.
Drew, I see that your hand is up.
Thank you. This is Drew Schaefer. I'm a member of the public. I am the director at the William E. Morris Institute for Justice, which represents the interests of low-income Arizonans, and appreciate your presentation, Joanna. I had a question. I did miss part of it. You mentioned a rules petition with the Supreme Court of Arizona, and I was just curious. I did not catch what that rules petition regarded. If you could elaborate on that, just because I missed it when I was listening to you.
Yeah, sure. So this is in relation to the information that's provided to renters when they're in an eviction crisis situation. So as of now, the information that the courts provide with a copy of the complaint about, what the process is and what happens now. The language is, very legalistic. It's not really accessible. It's, likely ignored by many, and may exacerbate the crisis situation by, just generally the language being intimidating. And so this kind of pulls into a conversation that we've been having for a while around how do we make language more accessible and easy to understand and friendly, I guess. And so we are working, and this is a group, it's the Housing Stability Collaborative. There's a group of stakeholders in Maricopa County, but it's not necessarily limited to Maricopa County. I mean, this is a state issue. So we're working on drafting a rule change petition that would change that language that's provided with the complaints. But what we found out is that it's really not an easy process, and we have to go through the Arizona Supreme Court to do that. And so it's going to be lengthy. So we're at the very beginning of that process, but it's something we're working on.
All right. Hey, thank you. I really appreciate that clarification. And I've started attending those meetings, so I may talk to you more about that down the road. So thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Joanna, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for all of your questions. The next item on the agenda is for us to discuss the tenant protection plan. I have not made any updates to that plan myself, and I don't believe anyone else has made any modifications to it. At this time, it's my opinion, and feel free to voice your thoughts and feelings about this, but I believe that it would be most productive for us to gather information are currently doing, and where they have seen success at the local level and the state level, so that perhaps our tenant protection plan could include local recommendations to both mayor and council regarding things that we can implement within a short or long-term period of time as a goal in the city, and then also regarding recommended advocacy efforts that mayor and council can take to the state legislature. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? You guys need some more time to think it over? Okay, so then we'll go ahead and continue to draft the tenant protection plan, first with getting as much information as we can from knowledgeable people like Joanna and whoever we can find to attend our meetings that has thoughts and recommendations. I know that I said earlier that we could circle back to Mindy and Brandi's conversation. Did you two want to pick that back up? Okay. I did connect both of you by email. I believe you should have received it. Brandi, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I received your email.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So then we are on to next steps and our next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for December 28th, 2022 at 4 p.m. Now, I acknowledge that that is right in the middle of the holidays. I wanted to let you folks know that it turns out that I unexpectedly have to leave Arizona and move in with some family because of some things that have come up. So definitely super unexpected. It's probably going to happen within the next 3 to 4 weeks. So I'm going to be in the process of moving out of state. And if we do actually have a meeting at that time, Mike would be the one to take over as our co-chair for the subcommittee. I'm totally fine with us having the next meeting in January. If I am still on the commission, I think that's under review because I'm leaving the state.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Liz.
Thanks, Mindy. All right. So folks, I don't know if you are going to be available and able to attend in the middle of the holidays in December, I'm happy to go ahead and say that our next meeting is going to be, let's see here, what is it going to be? January 2023. Last Wednesday of the month is January 25th at 4 p.m. Does that work for folks, or are they not comfortable with that much time between meetings? There being no objection. Okay. All right, so the next meeting will be scheduled the 25th at 4 p.m. Ernesto, if we could look at possibly trying to fix the webinar so that people can show their video.
Yes, I will.
Get a new invitation out.
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, all right, folks. Well, if there's nothing else, our meeting is adjourned. I'll see you at the full commission meeting if you plan on attending.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.